You know, beyond that content warning, I really don't know how to intro this. I also don't know how to title this. I have no idea what I'm going to call it. So, about a month back, if I get the timing of the release on this correct, I put out a video talking about an episode of Hazbin Hotel. Hazbin Hotel being the latest sort of adult animated show coming out of Amazon. And it has garnered a pretty strong reaction, partly because it has a pretty unique energy, even amongst the adult targeted animations out there. And it already had a fairly sizable pre-existing fan base because of the pilot episode that was put out back in 2019. So this already had a very vocal and energized fan base. It came out. I largely liked it. There were some concerns I had about episode 4 in particular. If you didn't see that video, go check that out because I'm not really going to reiterate anything that I go over in that. But briefly, I focused on the character of Angel Dust, who the whole thing is set in hell. So he is a sinner. He is being punished. But like hell there is weird. It's like in a lot of ways just our world, but worse, like all the worst parts are cranked up a bit. And my concerns were his depiction as a sex worker because he is a porn star. And I was very happy with how the video came out. Largely, people seem to understand what I was saying. Some folks got overly fixated on the specific show, when in reality, I was using the episode to leap off and have a larger conversation, using that as a starting point and using it as a place to cite examples of what I was talking about in terms of representation of sex workers, because it was in the zeitgeist. And yes, it's clickbaity. This is my job. I need you to click. But for the most part, I'm quite happy with the response to that. There was one comment, though, that I got that made me go, wait, what? And it was this. And I asked this person for a citation of what the heck they were talking about. They never replied back. I looked into it vaguely, not very much, though, because I learned very quickly that while this has a very energized and vocal fan base, since that pilot came out, there also has been a growing, I don't even know what to call it, anti-fandom? I'm not sure haters are necessarily the correct word, because oftentimes these people will purport to be fans of the show or to want to be fans of the show, but there is a contingent of folks out there who really want to rip into the creators, whether it be VivZpop, which is the YouTube channel that also hosts Hell of a Boss, which is big right now too, who is the original creator and the main creative force behind it, or whether it be some specific artists who work on the thing. And I didn't dig too far into it. I dug far enough to like, okay, there's definitely a very vocal contingent that has some very strong opinions about either certain aspects or certain people that are involved in this thing. But I wasn't going to dig any further than that because honestly, fandom toxicity is exhausting. I burn out on it real quick. I try to avoid it even with the stuff that I am actually slightly clued into the fandoms on. So, yeah, I was just going to leave it at that. Then I got an email. And that email was from an artist who goes by Raphielle II or R2 in his various online handles. And they reached out to me and he complimented me on the video I'd done. And I then floated the idea of, would he be willing to sit down and actually talk with me? This particular artist, who's a storyboard artist on both Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss, is very specifically who that one weird comment was referring to. So we sat down, we talked for over an hour. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being or how much I'm going to end up using, but there was a lot that we talked about. And I want to share some of what I learned with you. So this is ultimately going to cover the creative process, how one gets into this line of work, one's own inclinations, desires, what one does when they're public facing and have desires that other people find distasteful, and how to or how not to engage with, the public seems like the wrong word, but social media in regards to this kind of thing. And we're going to talk a bit later about the general notion of consent from an angle that was not what I thought about it from before. And I'm very excited to share all this with you. But why don't we start with introductions?
Hi, I'm Raphielle II, also known as R2. Some of you know me as Raph, the storyboard artist on Hell of a Boss and Hazbin Hotel. And here I am with Vera.
Now, how R2 got involved in the show is actually, I thought, quite a fun story, because at this point he's done a fair bit of significant work with the character of Angel Dust, as well as the somewhat associated characters of Valentino and a bit with Vox. For additional context, if you didn't go back and watch my original video, Angel Dust, I already covered a little bit. Valentino is Angel's physically, verbally, and sexually abusive boss. And while every indication within the show, and basically confirmed in some media that is outside of the show itself, which there's a lot of. This is one of my few complaints about the show, that I feel like there's information that should have been in the episodes itself that is out there, but you have to go out of your way to find. But regardless, every evidence is that Angel enjoys doing porn. It's just he's stuck in a contract and a relationship with someone who abuses him and takes something that he loves and twists it into something harmful. Even as this life and the world in which he exists appeals to him, he's stuck in a toxic way of engaging with it. It is interesting to learn that the character of Angel Dust was by no means created by R2, but he's pretty intrinsic to that character at this point for a number of reasons.
It's actually a story that I love telling because it's such a crazy coincidence. It feels like the stars all lined up, but I became a fan of the show when the pilots came out a little after that. So it was like, I think Hazbin came out in October, and then Hell of a Boss was November, I think. I watched them in December, and it was like Christmas, where I was like, oh, I would love to dress as Angel Dust for MagFest, because I saw his clips and immediately fell in love with him. Just like, oh my God, this character, what is it about him? I need to like dress up as him for MagFest. It's like the convention I go to every year. And so I asked for pieces of, things I can make into the costume for Christmas. And then from Christmas through New Year's, I did this very last second cosplay where I was like painting it in my garage, trying to get it done. I was like messing it up, but I like only had this one jacket to work with. So I like had to like paint over my mistakes. It was this crazy, hectic, unnecessarily complicated thing, but I got this thing done. And then I went to this convention, and it was the best time I had ever had in a cosplay. It brought out confidence in me that I had no idea that I even had. Like, I'm talking, I would be like walking down the hallway and the crowd would part because I was strutting with so much sass, and people were like, whoa. And I would like walk past, like, I remember I walked past a bar at one point to get to a bathroom, and all of the drunk normies were like cheering for me. And I walked away from this convention. Like, I didn't want to take off the wig. I was so addicted to the feeling, not pun not intended. I was just addicted to this feeling of confidence and like people like just exuding that. And I was like, okay, how do I bring that into my real life? This is insane. And the thing about Angel that a lot of people don't understand, because I adore this character so much, maybe to like almost too much, he changed my life. Because just in that weekend of me just cosplaying him and what he brought out of me, like I saw him as a character and went, this is what I've been holding back for so long. Because my history, and I'll get into that later possibly, but like, I've been deeply controlled my whole life by a mother who is like, very over religious, very conservative, and I could not be what I wanted to be. And there was like all these pieces of me that I like wanted to be, I know was in there, but I held back because I was afraid of what people would think of me. And I loved how unapologetic Angel was. So I started taking pole dancing classes when I wanted to take like sexy dance classes for a good long time. I was trying to dress a little sexier. Like I just wanted to be more openly just open with my sexuality. And so this convention is right after New Year's, and I'm not even kidding you. I think it was like a week, maybe 2 weeks later, I was listening to a podcast, and it mentioned going to Twitter, and I was like, I should go to Twitter and see if there's any updates on this show, because I have no idea what they're doing. There's a pilot, and now, like, is there an episode 2 coming out? Like, what is this? And I go there, and I go to Vivzy Pop's Twitter, and right there at the top, it says, now I'm closing applications for storyboard artists because I got way too many. She's like, I'm closing them on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody. There's so many for me to sort through. I have to close it down. I saw that, and it was like 3:30 a.m. on Wednesday, and I tried being a board artist years ago, and I gave up because, oh, too many people want this, like, I don't want it bad enough. A bunch of no's got me to give up, and I'll be like, I'll just be a fucking graphic designer, have a webcomic, like, whatever. But I had a storyboard portfolio just kind of collecting dust, and so I just, like, wiped off the dust. I sent it in, like, just on a whim, not even kidding you. An hour later, Viv replies to me with, like, this is great. Can you, like, I'm going to send you a test. And so it felt like the door was closing, and I, like, slid under. And the kind of full circle moment about this whole thing is that the first assignment I had was Addict, because I got hired a week or two later, and then I think it was Valentine's Day when Addict by Silverhound released, like, just the song, not the music video. I, to myself, was thinking, oh, I would love to make an animatic to this. And then Viv was like, I think we should do a music video to this. Who wants to do it? And I'm like, over here. And what it was that I got to do pole choreography. And I had just started taking classes because of Angel Dust. And Addict was like the first time everyone got to see Angel's kind of other side to his life, because he was so, like, you know, his persona in the pilot, but then we got to see more of his history in Addict. That was just the coolest thing. And since then, you know, now I'm trusted with scenes like Poison, and just recently I went to MagFest again, and I was in, like, a better Angel Dust cosplay, and I even put on the Poison outfit. There aren't any pictures of me out there with it right now, but it was an outfit that I helped design because I drew it into my board. You know, 4 years later, I'm back at this convention, but I'm wearing an outfit that I designed for a scene that I put so much into. Like, my whole soul went into this fucking scene. And, like, and now there's, like, a little piece of me in this character that helped me.
Now, at the time he and I talked, I had seen the show, all 8 episodes that are on Amazon Prime. I'd seen bits and pieces of the pilot. I hadn't gone out of my way to see it. One of the things I hadn't seen, which is actually a pretty big deal, is the music video, which is not only a spotlight on Angel Dust and is on the YouTube channel for Vivzy Pop, but that music video, that is the single most viewed video on that channel. So people definitely connected to this combination of the music, the nature of this story, and the drama, and the person at the center of it. And it is worth specifying in terms of being a storyboard artist. Again, as I said, R2 didn't create Angel, but at this point he has guided a lot of how Angel has been presented. I'm going to let him talk in more specifically about what the process of working on Hazbin Hotel is, but just broadly speaking, so you understand, the storyboard artists are not involved in the scripting or the direction of actors. However, within that framework, he or any other storyboard artist has a lot of freedom in terms of determining the angles that things will be shown from, the poses that characters get in, the way that they will move. So they kind of serve as a combination cinematographer and choreographer in a way, and then it'll later be handed over to animators who will actually get the movement and get them from one pose to the next. But it is worth pointing out that while he has a lot of creative input on how it ends up looking, what is happening, the scripting, the story choices are not his. And I get the sense sometimes with some of the people who go after him that they think he has imposed this story onto Angel. I don't think all of them think that. I think some of them get that distinction, although they then tend to just raise objections about him in particular being the one to storyboard this, but we'll get into why that is a little bit later. But I'll let him go into more specifics of what the process is.
I did do all of Poison, but the whole range is that it's right when Val goes, so let's take this shit from the top. And so it's like right before they start filming when Charlie is there. It's Charlie setting everything on fire. Can I see you in your dressing room? The dressing room scene, Angel kicking Charlie out, and then the entirety of Poison. I'm handed the script, I'm handed the song. They tell me what they want for it. I read the script. The script has a description of what they want. Not specifically. Obviously, the board artist comes up with like most things visually, but direction wise, like it is not mine. We get a radio play also, so like we'll hear it, and then from what you hear you can draw what sounds like the characters are doing. And in this case, the dressing room scene was pretty much a bunch of like, it was what you hear. It's Angel's screams and grunts and Val growling, and the script had a light description of what was happening, like he hides behind the chair, he is thrown into the couch, but specifically how it's done, Val had like a so he's gonna literally throw him there, and I had to visualize step by step in detail by listening to it what it was. And then the song, that was mostly Viv going, go ahead, do your thing. Because if you know my work on Hell of a Boss, I tend to do the harder scenes. So she does trust me with these scenes. They give me these characters because they know that I love them. These are my favorite characters and I love working with them, but I have no contribution to what actually happens in the show.
This is probably as good a time as any to mention that R2 engages in sex work, as does Angel Dust, as do I. That was pretty heartening for me to find out in the first place because I had expressed previously I really hope someone who engages in sex work was working on episode 4 of Hazbin Hotel. Although again, R2 was not part of the writing, that was still a nice thing to find out. And much like a lot of his journey, Angel Dust had an influence on that too.
So I will admit that the sex work didn't start till after I discovered Angel Dust as a character. But previously to that, just through my 20s, there were like many times where I had signed up on like Chatterbait wanting to be a cam girl and then just freaking out and not doing it because I was afraid like someone I know is gonna find me. And I had done like stuff via webcam with guys that I didn't know very well, that kind of stuff. But making money doing the thing, hadn't quite done that yet. And I wanted to take like sexier dance classes. I, for a while, didn't think I wanted to do pole. I wanted to try like chair dancing, but the place I went to, pole was a prerequisite. And so I fell in love with pole by doing that. So it is that Angel did inspire it, but it's not because it's like, I want to be Angel Dust. It's Angel brought out this person that I always wanted to be. And I just said, fuck it. I want to just be this and not be sorry for it. I don't care what my parents say if they do find out. If any studio, like a job down the line sees this and thinks bad of me, fuck that. I don't want to work with them anyway. If people don't like that about me, okay, you're not my friend. That is the kind of attitude that he inspired out of me, is just the unapologeticness. And there is like a big part of that in this whole conversation, which is like people are so angry that I'm so blunt and brash about the things that I like, but that's kind of the fucking point. People are like this, and we shouldn't have to be sorry for it.
Of course, being open to say nothing of unapologetic about one's more adult interests does not come without some pushback. And this is where we can circle back to that comment I got that confused me and start to look at how a certain sliver of the Hazbin Hotel fandom has responded to R2 and his involvement with the show.
It did start with Addict on Twitter. I had posted pictures of Angel and Val, not even like the worst, not safe for work, but very harsh comics of like, there's like one specifically where he's beating him up in the dressing room, ironically. And this was later on, but I did a music video where he also assaulted him in there. I'll do plenty of drawings of Angel tied up, and then like Vox or Val are the ones doing that to him. And that's pretty much just what I draw and people put together. It's like, oh, so you're the one who did these scenes in Addict. These are the scenes you like to draw on your regular day. And then I very openly like Val Angel as a ship.
So, shipping. I've said in the past that I don't ship. I'm not a shipper. I don't really get it. And I'm going to reemphasize this. When I say I'm not a shipper, I'm not going to say I never have any investment in the dynamics and relationships between characters in media that I enjoy. I do to varying degrees, but I don't get involved with shipper fandom, which is a whole other thing. And it can get just the notion of shipping and shipper communities in general can get really messy and really toxic really quick. Not that I'm saying the engaging with the practice of shipping is inherently toxic, but there are a lot of people who really hate what they perceive shippers as doing, and then the fighting gets real bad real quick. It gives me one more reason to not get involved in that aspect of family, aside from the fact that I don't have a natural inclination to do so. However, it is worth noting that strictly speaking, shipping two characters doesn't mean you think they actually belong together or should end up together.
Which is like not even like I want them to be a happily ever after. I just enjoy the dynamic of the two of them. It's like the internet when you like any problematic ship and there's something wrong with you. I think the first time I really saw that as an issue was I liked Jasper and Lapis from Steven Universe, and I saw people on Tumblr being so angry about that. And I was like, why? I don't know. It's just a bad guy and a good guy. And I know it's like, you know, a non-consensual sort of thing, but it's like, okay, they're two fictional characters. It's a bad guy and a good guy, and it's sexy. Like, I don't know. That's it.
It's not necessarily co-signing it as a good thing, because, you know, even setting aside the notion of problematic faves, like, you can enjoy something that you know is objectively in any real world sense a bad thing, but you can still take enjoyment out of it for yourself. And in theory, saying that you ship two characters who are in a demonstrably abusive relationship, that just means you find that relationship, that connection, and the nature of that story to be dynamic and interesting and impactful for you, or maybe even enticing. We'll get to that bit a little bit later, but the thing is, while that's technically true, at this point, saying that you ship two characters is pretty much always going to be interpreted or treated as if you believe they belong together. And unless you do a lot of work to make it clear that that's not what you mean, then just using the term ship or shipping, or that you're a shipper of this kind of thing, then yeah, people are going to interpret it that way.
I think people think like if I say ship, that means I'm like, oh, Angel loves it, or like I think they're gonna work out their problems and have a happily ever after. And maybe I'm defining ship wrong, because I thought relationship meant just like any dynamic between two characters, not necessarily I want them to get together. Like I would be more than happy if Angel got together with someone nicer, got away from Valentino. I'll appreciate the stories between them in his struggle with Val. And then, like, yes, me on a sexual level, I do enjoy those sorts of scenes. But yeah, okay, at the end of the story, be happy. I'm happy for you. Like, I just enjoy the drama. It's the same as like someone watching a true crime thing. Obviously, you don't want to see people get raped and murdered, but people will fall asleep to that shit, you know?
And honestly, at this point, maybe we need a different word for people who engage with a toxic or unhealthy dynamic between characters that they still find really fascinating and really enjoy and want to discuss, see more often, or make content about themselves, but they don't actually think is in any way aspirational. Maybe we need a separate term or like a subcategory for that. I don't know. But it does exist. And that sort of starts to lead us in To the thing that the people who have a big problem with R2 and their presence on the show tend to focus on, which is two things. One being an aspect of R2's own personal interests, and one specific interaction that happened on Twitter. Stick a pin in that. We'll come back to it. It did have to be addressed. But as R2 themselves explained, they've been pretty open about their interests in some very specific adult activities that other people might consider to be severe.
I've tried to explain it publicly a few times. I practice BDSM, and I've been doing it for a good while now, before even Hazbin, angel dust, all that kind of stuff. I've had partners who have tied me up. Pretty much any sexual encounter I've had ended up being that at some point, because it has been something that's been present in my life. I was scared of it for a good long time, and then I slowly was accepting it about myself, that I am very freaky in my interests, and it's a taboo fetish, but you're doing it in the safest, most controlled environment where everyone will talk about the scene before entering it. You do it with a trusted partner. I'm so picky about my partners. There are so many people who will know what I'm about because I am so public about it. And then they'll be like, I'd love to try that with you. And it's like, no, not trying. You need to be experienced with this. You can't just tie me up. I also have a hypno fetish. I'm not just going to suddenly sit down in front of a spiral and let you try to fucking brainwash me. No, I'm smart about it.
It is really important to understand when it comes to the idea of consensual non-consent that phrase in specific has to do and is meant to apply largely to real world situations. So a role play with someone, you don't ever want to be in a non-consenting situation. What you do want is a consensual non-consent situation, which basically breaks down to the two people involved in a CNC scene, CNC being consensual non-consent. They have agreed what the limits are, what the safe word is, what parameters they are setting, but once they are in the scene, they will behave as if there was not consent established and it is not present. The reality is that consent very much is present, but in a safe scene, which these absolutely can be, that is something that gets established separate from the actual activity being engaged in. So when people latch onto the idea that R2 is problematic because they have a rape fetish, and it's not just a matter of him liking CNC because his fan art of these characters only reflects the non-consent.
So I'm aware that people have pulled up the phrase rape fetish, because there is a screenshot of me calling it that. And the thing is that a lot of people who want to yell, it's a rape fetish, not a consensual non-consent fetish. I'm sorry, it's the same thing. Unless you very, very specifically love a scene where it starts out opening with the two characters being like, tee, let's do this. And then they go into the crazy scene that they're role playing out, and then by the end you see the aftercare and stuff. If you very specifically want to see that whole thing play out and that is your fetish, all right, fine. But I will be honest and say I think that's a gateway into just reading the part where they're role playing.
The characters aren't engaging in CNC. The characters are engaging in something that you wouldn't do in reality. That's part of the safety of fiction. That's part of the safety of art or writing or animation.
What I do in my life is consensual non-consent, because I think there's a whole bunch of idiots out there who think that I just because I say it's a rape fetish, I don't know, they think I'm waiting on the street for someone to get me. You know what I mean? They think I'm just going out and doing shit. I'm positive that these people think I'm Valentino. I'm the one doing this shit to Angel. I am just a fucking, first of all, I'm a sub, I'm a bottom, I'm a baby, I talk baby talk, and I ask people to fuck me a little hard. That is my crime. And I write I draw things that are very, very intense. Anyone who's ever done anything to me, clearly consensual, and they know what I'm about. So it's not like I go into this and like catch them off guard or something. It is just, it's a partner that we do a scene that's on the rougher side, and that's it.
And I do understand the gut instinct to want to ask the question, where is the consent? And that is a question I myself have asked. I did a video a year or two back asking that general question and kind of bemoaning the lack of established consent within a lot of our media. To be clear, that wasn't an across the board blanket thing, but it was frustrating to me that not showing consent was so standard. And not to the level of something like Hazbin Hotel, which gets into outright abuse, but just like guy goes in and kisses a girl. He has not asked for permission to do that, so, and she has not clearly signaled that. Like, just as basic as that is a very common depiction, and it frustrates me, especially because consent can be sexy. It's just most don't bother to depict it. But in that case, I wouldn't say that there should never be an instance of depicting something with no consent established, especially if that's kind of the point of the scene. The video that I made was much more focused on talking about scenes in which we are meant to be happy that this is happening and be encouraging of these two getting together, but they don't bother to establish consent, which certainly makes it harder for me in a lot of instances to feel like it's a good thing. Whereas Hazbin Hotel at no point pushes the idea that Val and Angel should be together. This is a bad thing, and it's always depicted as such.
I remember years ago, another issue with this sort of thing was like the obsession with Harley Quinn and Joker. People are like, this is a toxic relationship. I'm concerned for people. Like, there are people who are saying, I'm concerned for people who wish they were Harley and they had a Joker. And it's like, that's clearly not what a smart person would do. And then I guess there are people out there who need to be told, no, you don't want that. I guess that's a learned thing. Like, I don't really know how to like properly do that in media except for like showing that the character that is doing the abuse is bad, which at least in Hazbin's, like, of course, like, yeah.
Okay, so with something like Hazbin Hotel, let's accept that there is not consent between the characters within the narrative. But is there still consent of a sort? Well, R2 kind of opened my eyes about that.
Even an argument that I've been saying recently is that what I do for my work can be considered consensual non-consent, because in art, in what I draw and the content that I create, it is still the fantasy. It is me and whoever's involved. It's consensual, and we are creating this thing. In the animation, the writers, the directors, the actors, the board artists, the animators, everyone past that, cleanup, compositing, everyone involved in this project has consented to creating this non-consensual scene. And so we have created the fictional fantasy of this thing, not fantasy as if it's like a sexual thing, but like we have created non-consent, a scene of non-consent, and we have put it out there. And then someone who chooses to watch it beyond the warning, and I'm aware there was not a warning at the beginning of this thing, and I'm glad there is now. But once you see that warning and you see what this is about, and even people who, because I'm aware that people who hate the show are fully aware that Angel's story, like from Addict, they know that that's what they were going to get into, and they still decide to watch it. They are consenting to watching the thing. And you know what their safe word is? The pause button, the X button. They can leave. Like, it can end at any time. But they decided to witness the scene, and they're upset that they saw it. And so when it comes to me posting art, I put up a warning and they decide to click on it. That's them consenting to see it. And then they get upset that they have entered my scene. It's basically a scene. I am playing something out, granted publicly, but there are things to stop you. There are things to cater your internet world to, like, you can block tags. You can like block people. You can block me. You can not watch the show. The people who are upset about this, I know, are fully aware of Angel's story, and they still decide to watch it. they are consenting to seeing the shit and they're mad that they're there.
The one aspect of this I would push back on slightly is the notion that all those who worked on it had consented only because of the inherent exploitative and coercive nature of needing to work for a living. That, of course, doesn't preclude everyone who worked on it being people who would consent to it, but it also means it is completely possible that there are people who maybe wouldn't voluntarily work on that if they didn't need the paycheck. Now, in the case of Hazbin Hotel specifically, R2 did let me know that designers, animators, etc. Can put down what kind of scenes they are not comfortable working on, and so far as he is aware, that is honored. However, while that is thankfully the case here, it should never be assumed that is the case for all studios and all productions, etc., etc. But that having been said, this is something that admittedly I had never really considered. The idea that when depicting work like what happens to Angel in a piece like Hazbin Hotel, the consent is had between the creatives involved, and the consent from the viewer is that you are watching. You consent to what we're going to show you by sitting down to watch this. And if you need to bail, pause or X out of it. Now, I will note that informed consent is important for this dynamic to work, i.e. content warnings. They are vital, and it is worth pointing out that initially when episode 4 of Hazbin Hotel went up, it did not have a content warning at the front end. It has had one added since. It really should have been there from the beginning. But assuming that something is rated appropriately and has an appropriate content warning. And I actually think it is important in the case of Hazbin Hotel that even though it is rated as it is, that content warning still should have been in front of that episode, because that specific degree of harshness was not something that the show had done up to that point. I think giving people a heads up and the option to bow out or at least take some time to prepare themselves so they're not blindsided by it is informed consent. So when I say you consent to it by watching, that doesn't mean that you had informed consent. And there are still inappropriate times to insert this sort of thing, depending on who the audience is, what the venue is, what the platform is. This is not a blanket defense of like, well, if you didn't want to see it, you shouldn't have clicked on it, you shouldn't have hit play. Like, there has to be a reasonable expectation of where one does or does not think this sort of thing is going to come up. And if it's going to come up in a place, in a space, on a platform, in a show where you would not otherwise expect it, yeah, a content warning is kind of the bare minimum.
I am fully behind that. I always put warnings on my art when I would do it, or like if I did at any point, that was before I realized that people did put warnings, and then after that I would always, like, in all caps, warning. And then like when Twitter added like the sensitive content thing, I did that. The beginning of that the Valentina music video, I don't know if you saw that, but like that has like a very big warning at the beginning of it. Yeah, I'm fully behind that. But then like people still get angry because it exists. They watched it anyway. And it's like, okay, it wasn't for you.
I'm not going to say that you are not allowed to criticize if you feel that this work was done badly. If you think that it was done in a way that the specifics of the depiction are harmful, you have every right to criticize it. But to complain about its presence at all, if there is proper content warnings and ratings applied, that is the consent for an otherwise non-consensual scene. The creators consented to make it, you consented to watch it, and you have the ability to bail at any moment. This is something that honestly is a perspective I'd never thought of before. I'm not sure if I'd seen the sentiment pop up before, but I never really gave it much thought until he said it. And it's a really interesting one to think through. As I said, like, it's not a blanket defense of stuff. There is nuance to be had, whether it's marking your account on something like Twitter as not being something that is intended for anyone under the age of 18, or to simply restrict yourself to platforms where that kind of content is more accepted and more appropriate. Although in the case of Twitter, like, it gets weird because Twitter is weirdly public, yet at the same time, this sort of stuff is permitted. So, if you're not violating the rules of the platform, is it your fault for putting it out? Or is it people's fault for looking for it? Because the algorithm is going to show you what you interact with, by and large. Unless something's gone really wrong, if you have gone out of your way to avoid that kind of content, to mute people, block creators, and block hashtags and trending topics that would bring that stuff to you, then you shouldn't be seeing it. And if you've gone out of your way to, that is a form of consent. Again, that's not as a blanket that makes everything okay all the time. You clicked on it, you have no right to complain. Well, no. Again, even within that understanding, something can still be genuinely harmful depending on how it is or isn't done, or it can just hit you in a way that even with the heads up you weren't prepared for, and that can still be jarring. That is all true and valid, and as I said, it's complicated, and there's nuance.
A lot of people will yell the argument like, of course it's bad. Anyone who's above 13 years old knows that it's bad. And it's like, yes, it is bad. I'm not cheering for anybody in real life to be in this situation. I'm actually that friend who has hated most of my friends' boyfriends just for looking at them funny. I obviously don't fucking approve of this stuff in real life. But, most therapists will be like, hey, if you have this taboo fetish, an itch that you need to get scratched, there are safe ways to go about it and to not bottle that up, because when you do bottle it up, that's when it becomes a problem. You don't want to bottle that up. And BDSM is wonderful because you are allowed to do it with a bunch of people who are the same and they want to talk to you about it openly, and it's a very welcoming community, and you talk out in detail what you want with that person in a scene, or you just find someone who connects with you and they're they have the same fantasies of you, and then they're willing to do it in a safe manner with a they know how to properly tie you without hurting you. They'll ask you, hey, is there any certain things that you don't want me to touch? Hey, do you have a bad shoulder? Is there something that is triggering for you? You don't like someone touching your chest? Okay, these are the safe words. It's just such a controlled thing. And they're especially in the BDSM community, everyone who I've met, that is fully what they talk about. It is all about the details. It's all about the contracts. It's all about figuring it out. You will not do anything with a partner until you talk to them. Then you get into the scene, and yeah, it can get crazy. I have done some pretty intense scenes, but then afterwards we're giggling and saying how awesome that was. We had a good time together, and we trusted each other, and we did something, we role played. It felt like a movie, we did something that is memorable, because just vanilla sex is just, okay, in and out for 20 minutes. Cool, thanks, bye. We performed a scene that was something else. It's really cool. I like it a lot. And I'm sad that people think it's so terrible.
Obviously, certain fetishes or kinks are just not for everybody. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. But it can be disheartening when people have such a negative reaction towards those who are not ashamed of themselves. And even aside from that, being an active part of the kink community comes with a lot of assumptions, usually about what has or hasn't happened to you. There's usually an assumption of some form of sexual assault in one's past, or otherwise just generally being a broken person, not helped by the fucking 50 Shades of Grey books and the associated movies. I actually had an entire tangent on those things, but I cut it for time. I may repurpose it elsewhere at a later date, but needless to say, while some might be able to trace their kinks back to something from childhood and possibly even something connected to trauma, that doesn't make kink itself unhealthy. Actually, for many, it is a necessary and very helpful coping mechanism, if not just an expression of themselves.
I said that I grew up with a very conservative mother who didn't let me do anything outside of the conservative box. She always used to use language you can't do this, or you don't want to do that, oh, you don't want to wear that, oh, you don't want to go there. And like everything that I wanted to do. Like if I wanted to like dress a little punky, if I wanted to cut my hair, like pretty much everything I am today is exactly the opposite of what my mom wanted me to be. When it came to sexuality, I didn't learn anything about how it worked until I like asked a friend in like science class in high school, like, hey, wait, how does the sperm get to the egg? And she like whispered in my ear, and then I had a fucking panic attack at home and couldn't sleep. I had a crush on Raphael from Ninja Turtles, and I grabbed my plushie of him and threw him across the room. Keep boys away from me. I can't do this. And anytime I had any kind of sexual thought, I used to hurt myself. It's like to condition myself not to feel these things. And on the kinky side, I had been tying myself up since I was a child, and I didn't know why I wanted it, but that like it was a burnt in fetish of mine that I have always had, and I thought there's something fucking wrong with me. And then I saw a comic, it was a Sunstone, and in the first chapter you see the main character tying herself up by like pulling the rope with her teeth, and immediately I was like, that's a thing, that's me. People actually do that. What is this? And I discovered BDSM, and I thought I finally wasn't crazy. And I just went on this journey through my 20s of like quietly figuring this out about me. And on a more private level, now I'm more like public about it, but like on a more private level, just like my sexuality was just exploding, just allowing myself to be me. And that was when I came out to my mom when I got a girlfriend, because I wasn't trans at the time. I was like, Mom, I'm a lesbian. And I had like, that was the most I'd ever fought with her, because like, how fucking dare I be anything else than what exactly she wanted me to be. And I cut my hair short without telling her, and she's like, oh my God, did you want to go that short? And then like, I used to wear chokers, and she's like, you're not that kind of person. And I'm like, what if I am? And she's like, no, you're not. That sort of thing. What I do, it doesn't come from a place of sexual trauma, but it comes from other kinds of trauma, where this whole thing, from the person who I like, the persona that I put out in public, the things that I draw, the things that I do with myself, it is like this full explosion of just wanting to be free. And the fact that my job allows me to draw these things so unapologetically, like they tell me, don't hold back. Like what I do is what they want, because I can handle these sensitive topics, while at the same time I can do it in a respectful way, because personally, when I look at these things, I don't think I'm going too far. But at the same time, like I'm doing it, not holding back whatsoever. And that is my freedom in a nutshell.
But we do kind of have that thing we stuck a pin into earlier. There was, aside from the fact that R2 engages in acts of BDSM, enjoys non-consent scenes, has drawn art of it, that was only one aspect of what people who really do not like them would hurl at them. The other thing was, as I mentioned, a specific interaction. This was an interaction with an account that appears to be a 15-year-old. So there was sort of the initial wave of distaste for R2 on Twitter in specific, and people, flinging, the accusations of being a rape fetishist, of co-signing or encouraging toxic situations, etc. And he had taken to engaging with these playfully, mockingly, teasingly, just not taking it very seriously. And unfortunately, one of those interactions ended up being with someone who claimed to be 15.
I did not know. It's fully, I'm going to say allegedly here, because I swear to God, I checked their profile and there was no age there. And I even have a friend who was in that conversation, who I went to them in a DMs and I was like, that person was 15. And they're like, there was no age there. Because when they took those screenshots, like the argument happened, and then like I said, like it's allegedly, because maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but like I swear to fuck there was no age there. And they were arguing with me. And me on, again, not safe for work account, doing mature shit, being notoriously inappropriate on my Twitter. I'm assuming the people who want to come in and yell at me about this shit are going to be of age. And like on a show that is an R-rated show, like I assumed they were of age. And then I'm telling you, it was, I think, maybe 2 months later, I am like walking around minding my own business. I check Twitter, and someone had dug up this conversation and replied with, that person was 15 years old. And I like clicked on the profile and I saw they added the age, or at least there was the age. I saw it and I panicked and went, I I swear I don't remember seeing that.
Now, whether or not the age was in the profile before R2 interacted with this person is basically unverifiable. This was an absolutely microscopic account. Nobody was screenshotting or archiving this account's bio before any of this happened. That account is still around, for the record. I did browse through it briefly, and it largely seems to just be repostings of stuff, occasionally replies, and it does look like this person is at least intermittently still poking the bear on things that are intended for adults. So I'm not going to try and psychoanalyze someone who I absolutely do not know, and I have no business looking into any further than just browsing their feed, which is all that I did.
I immediately responded with an apology, and everyone I've talked to said you shouldn't have apologized, but I went and apologized anyway because I panicked and I was just like, listen, I don't remember seeing this age. I swear I didn't know their age when I said this thing. So I apologized for being inappropriate, or I forgot my exact wording, but I said I did apologize immediately as soon as I saw the thing. And then I also, like, I'm going to be honest, the wording also went into, however, they shouldn't have been on my page talking to me about this subject matter. And it said, not safe for work. I had a not safe for work page. Everyone who remembers my Twitter, every tweet that I made was so beyond inappropriate, so brash, so blunt. And so if people wanted to bother me, that is how I would respond. That was the persona that this Twitter had. And like some people say, well, that's no excuse. You shouldn't be behaving like that online. And it's like, well, that's what I was doing online. And then some kid came into my house, messed up my shit. I yelled at them for it in the way that I do. And then they're going around saying that I sexually harassed them for something that I did not mean. I need to make that clear. I didn't fucking mean it. It was just me being mean. And like, also, if you've seen this comment, it was me saying, wow, you guys all have this one shared drive of me where you all have the same screenshots, like you're obsessing over me. Like, so I'm responding to people who are obsessing and stalking me, taking screenshots of me, which, by the way, all of these screenshots, they feel like they're gotcha moments. I'm sorry, they're just me being me. Like, I'm just being a person. Like, none of these, I was fully aware, I was fully conscious when I said these things. And they think it's like, oh, we caught you, you're a Val Angel shipper. It's like, yeah, I'm not hiding that. But anyway, yeah, they're mad at me for yelling at this kid where, like, they came in, I didn't know their age. I apologized when I found out. But now they blew it up into this big thing. You can cut this out if you want, but I retract my apology because they blew it up into something that really should not have blown up like it did.
I suppose the question then becomes, well, whether or not you believe R2. Some may choose to not believe. Some may choose to believe that he didn't check before responding. And if you just choose to believe that he's lying, then I don't know what to tell you. You're entitled to that belief. But if that's what you believe, then nothing that I say from here on matters. That's just what you think. But if you believe him that it didn't say 15 at the time, but then said it later, and I don't want to get into conspiratorial thinking with like, because I know some people float the idea like, oh, I bet they added the 15 later just to get him in trouble. I don't want to go down that route. Is it possible? Yes, but it's unprovable and it's a useless rabbit hole. So if we take everybody involved at their word, that this person was 15, that R2 did check, but it didn't say 15 at the time he replied the way he did, where does that leave us? Was it unreasonable for him to assume that his account and his feed marked for adults was only going to be interacted with by adults? Realistically, no, but to what degree do we hold him responsible for that? And by that I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There are children fans of Hell of a Boss, of Hazbin Hotel. It's not written for children. It's not intended for children.
Kids die for free.
I know when I was younger, or at least like a lot of my friends when they were younger, because I was very sheltered, like, you know, people are gonna watch stuff that is like, you know, too mature for them. And when I started in the fandom, I really took it for what it actually is, which is like it's a very horny, very like, you know, sexy show, you know, like there's a lot of BDSM in there, there's a lot of kinky references, and it's a bunch of nasty people, so you would think you would get content of them being nasty. And it's like, are we watching the same show? There's a bunch of people who just think that's completely unacceptable, and they act shocked when they actually do something that's, you know, not good or questionable. And I knew that we had an audience that was younger, but it really threw me off last year when I realized the people who were coming at me were younger. That really fucked with me. And I was like, oh, I I'm not for kids, man. I gotta go. Like that was my thought. I was just like, oh, the people, like, so the people who are harassing me about my fetishes coming onto my not safe for work Twitter, where I am very infamously here making not safe for work art, doing the most adult scenes in the shows, and you're coming to my Twitter, you're coming into my house and yelling at me and getting me into trouble. And it's like, that's ew. I already hated Twitter because, like, you know, the X thing, the Elon Musk shit. I was also getting so sick of everyone being like, I'm leaving Twitter, I'm done with Twitter, and then no one would leave. And then so I just got to this point where I was just so like angry and upset, and I wanted to educate these like shitty like minors who were coming at me who they don't know what they're talking about. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. You know what? I'm gonna do the thing. And I deleted it. And like when I tell people why I delete it, it's like I realized there was a bunch of minors in this fandom who, I'm sorry, have no business being here. Like, because it says mature audiences only. If you're gonna get mad about this shit, guess what? You're not mature enough. I've gotten into arguments where people want me to explain it. Fine, I explain it. And then they give me an argument that completely misses the point. It's like, I rest my case. You just don't get it yet.
Children, people under 18, they watch it. They like it. They engage with it. They look up the creators. They find this stuff. Is that his fault or the fault of creators like him? My gut inclination on that is no. If the platform that you're on, such as Twitter, which was what he was on at the time, allows you to make this kind of content, how responsible are you to ensure that no one under the age of 18 engages with your stuff? I mean, theoretically, that should be the platform's issue. And if the platform felt that that content shouldn't be on there at all, it would ban it. And Twitter does not. Didn't then, still doesn't. And so it becomes a big recursive conversation like, okay, should a 15-year-old even be on Twitter? Well, whether or not you think they should, a lot of them are. Should you respond to everyone as if they are a minor? Well, then you are robbing people of the ability to just interact as an adult. Whether you feel that our two specific responses were edgelordy and provocative or not, like, should you just have the ability to interact as an adult with other adults on a space like that? And if you think that you should be able to, then yeah, this kind of thing can happen. Was it maybe inappropriate to give a very sexualized response to people who didn't seem to like you, you could make that argument. I personally, I can say that I wouldn't have replied that way, and I'm not doing that in like a high and mighty way. Just, I don't know. The idea of a sexualized response to somebody who is actively displaying distaste for me, it's very rare that I feel the inclination to do that. But like, I'm me, he's him. So my standard of what I would or wouldn't do is kind of irrelevant in these circumstances.
I understand that it's complicated. I understand that it's a fine line. I understand that it is triggering for people, and like I am triggering for people, the content I make and the stuff that I very openly am just like, hey, this is the stuff I like, and if you stumble across the things that I do and it triggers you, I'm sorry. I truly am. I don't want to be a problem for people. I guess just my understanding of the internet is that you cater your own experience. You create your own internet experience. So just block me, mute me, whatever. I get it. I understand the perspective. I'm not for you, and I'm sorry that you witnessed my scenes. That's really all it comes down to.
And it's tricky. It's the thing that, honestly, I would imagine a lot of creators like R2 dread. Because they go into these spaces, mark their stuff as for adults, engage with other adults on a platform that allows for this content to be made and distributed. And they have good faith that that's what they're going to be dealing with, but also you can't control what he does, but he can't control what a 15-year-old does either. Is that his responsibility? Is that Twitter's responsibility? Is that a parent's responsibility? Is that everybody's responsibility? It takes a village and all that. I don't know.
I'm going to be so honest and say that when I was a kid and when it was a time on Twitter where we all went into places that we shouldn't have, and it's really no one's business to babysit that. It's the parents. The parents should know where their kids are going. I definitely read and looked at things that I shouldn't have as a kid, but it's none of that account's business to babysit or track what I'm doing. I wasn't policing that. I think there were definitely accounts out there who are very, very strict. Do not interact. I need to approve your account if you're going to look at my shit. And I just wasn't into doing that. Like, it's not because I was like, okay, everyone come to me. It was just mostly like, that's none of my damn business. Like, it's not my job to vet every single person who's following me. And so I was just doing my own thing. And that's pretty much it. Like, and if someone wants to come in and start that conversation, me, I guess, like, naively just thought that if someone was going to have that conversation with me, they would be of age.
I don't have a solution for that, but there was no way I could have a conversation with or about R2 and not talk about this incident and give him the chance to speak his side of that, because it's not too difficult to find the side presented by other people, which pretty much never includes the apology that R2 sent out. Although, to be completely fair, I also have to kind of take his word on that because he got rid of his Twitter account some time ago. So I actually can't provide screenshots of that, largely because the people who are slamming him over this, they don't show that he apologized because they want to make him look bad. So trying to find the apology kind of came up short on my end. Unless somehow during the editing process I do manage to dig it up, in which case you'll get an insert right here. And if you don't, I couldn't.
Young people don't understand that the thing that upsets and triggers them doesn't necessarily mean that that should never be shown.
So how do I wrap all this up into something coherent, to a grander, greater point? I can't. Life isn't that clean. Or maybe I'm just not that good at this job yet. But regardless, the more that I got to talk with R2 and hearing his perspective on these things, these events, the kinds of stuff that he is interested in, involved in, a lot of which has a lot of crossover with stuff that I do as well. Not on this platform and not on anything that's linked in the description, because I do try and keep appropriate separation between stuff, but I was able to both relate to a lot of what he said, and he also got me thinking about things that I hadn't thought about in that way before. And I really wanted to share what it was like to kind of have just a different perspective from someone who I got along with very well in that conversation. And I think could probably just sit down and chat with. Like, this might seem weird, but one of the most freeing experiences that I have had, and I've had it intermittently, but not too often, is to be able to basically just like grab a coffee and sit down and talk shop with someone about stuff that would seem very odd for other people that we are having a casual conversation about. But that's just lovely.
Yeah, that's my favorite kind of conversations, when you find someone who like gets it, you know. Like I recently, like, I'll keep this short because we're trying to wrap up, but like I recently went to MagFest, and I happened to come across a fan fiction writer who, like, she left the fandom a long time ago. She walked up to me and introduced herself, and I was like, holy shit, you're one of the Val Angel writers. Like, and she just kind of was like, it's so nice to see you, can I get your picture? Cool, bye. And I was like, hey, no, come back, we gotta talk. Let's talk shop. We ended up going to a bar and like drinking and just like talking about everything. Okay, people hate Val Angel people, but like they are the nicest kinds of people, because like they're just so open and understanding about, like, yeah, of course it's bad, but like we accept that we're not monsters about it, and we'll like practice it safely within our fan fiction and our role plays and stuff. You know, that's it. We don't actually want it. I love the kink community. Like, they're just so open to be freaks. They're all just a bunch of nerds. That's really it.
To get relaxed enough to realize my own gaps in terms of understanding, or at least considering, the notion of where consent fits in when we're talking about a completely fictionalized work of art. I mean, there's consent within a narrative, but if consent doesn't have a place within a narrative, and in a story like Angel and Valentino, it doesn't, that's the point, then taking into consideration where the power of consent lies with the viewer. It's all stuff that has given me a lot to think about. I wouldn't be shocked if I either use moments from this interview again in future videos, or at least reference this again. It's a wider perspective than I've had, and I hope it was something that you found interesting and engaging as well. Again, I have no freaking clue what the heck I'm going to call this. I have no notion of how to promote this. But regardless, thank you again to R2 for sitting down and talking with me.
Thank you. You were absolutely wonderful.
I will put a link to their YouTube channels. If you are interested in the other stuff they do, you can look that up in your own time. As for me, what are your thoughts on this? Whatever your thoughts are, if you can keep them polite to me, to R2, even to the people who have gone after him. Just no personal attacks. Just don't. Just don't. It's so easy. I'm asking you to not do a thing. It's the easiest thing in the world, is to not do a thing. But whatever your thoughts are, if you can keep them respectful, drop them down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is what enables me to do this as my living, to have the time in my day to be able to sit down and talk with people like R2, and to take the time to edit this, which, wow, turned into a much bigger thing than I expected it to, but here we are all the same. And I say that and it sounded like it was fancily edited, just, you know, a lot of stuff to go through. But even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe, those all help. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, You are valid. And you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. Until next time, this council is adjourned. Time for me to thank my high supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Turok, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Ruth, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris. That was a new one, that's why I paused. Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabi Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Twisted Wishes, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pau Barabajoggle, and Mara G. if you want to support me as well and help keep these little buggers fed, check out my Patreon. Thanks so much.
Can we pause for a second? My cat just brought me a toy. I need to give him a treat. Like, this is if this is going to be a thing, I need to be prepared. Sully, buddy. Okay, Sully, I may have to lock you out if this is going to be a problem. I love you so fucking much. Okay, bud. We gotta go.